Just want to talk a little boxing. We'll cover some Drawn in his boots. He's still up to his shenanigans of trying to go the easier route, you know. And we are looking at what they're reporting about Tank Davis, although I don't believe it. He's just having problems, you know, with his legal issues and still getting over his last performance against Roach. You know, Rick Glacier, he's hit and miss sometimes, so you can't really go off what he says. But the whole point of this video is to highlight the mindset of a coddled, pampered, scripted fighter. And, you know, today you guys are trying to defend Tank while simultaneously trying to cheerlead a guy like Drawn in his boots. And Drawn in his boots is just heading down the same route as a Gervonta Tank Davis. He's not really challenging himself. He's allowed to fight guys who sit out for years and just had a baby and still managed to retain their belts for whatever reasons. And then, you know, as soon as you finally win a belt, you know, although it was a pretty weak way on how you won the belt, you want to move up weight division and you don't want to fight Ortiz. Again, Keith Thurman just recently came out and expressed this, like, what is it that you want to do, Drawn in his boots? And we've already called Drawn in his boots out a long time on this channel, and we used receipts, we used video. We showed you how his dad knew that they were going to strip a belt off of Crawford and give it to Boots, you know? So Boots is one of those types of guys, you know? Once I see who you truly are, you know, I don't have to second guess or think twice about what I'm dealing with when it comes to a fighter like Boots. Same thing with Errol Spence. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, you know what I'm saying? But then when I saw what happened when he met Crawford face to face, it showed me who you're all about. You know, you're on the wrong side of the street, told me who you are, you know? But the mindset of a coddled fighter, pampered fighter, scripted fighter, and this is going to play into the Terrence Crawford versus Canelo fight. It is. Canelo's at the point of his career like a tank. You know, he's been coddled so much. He's been given the easier route so much that he doesn't really have the grit or the teeth when you are met with adversity to really go out there and try to win and earn victories and things like that. That's not in you anymore. What the fuck are you doing, you fucking idiot? But I'm driving right now, sorry. But, you know, you've been given the silk sheets, and the silk sheets do have an effect. Now, regardless if Tank is retired or not, if that is true, he has been talking retirement. And just like a Canelo Alvarez, Tank has had to do things like weight train Ryan Garcia, where we see guys like Rolly, you know, just believed in himself and didn't have to do all that crazy stuff to beat Ryan Garcia. You know, it shows that these fighters never have the true confidence that a lot of you guys tried to showcase them as having. Again, Canelo was putting rehydration clauses on guys like Rocky Fielding. Rocky Fielding is a C- D+ level fighter. Do you understand? There's nothing that you need to worry about a Rocky Fielding. But Canelo was still shook and still had to make sure that he had parameters in place just in case Rocky Fielding decided he wanted to go off script and try to actually beat up Canelo Alvarez. You know what I'm saying? And that's another thing too, these non-disclosure agreements. You know, guys like Kovalev, he let off before the fight that, yeah, you know, he signed a non-disclosure agreement. There's a rehydration clause, you know, and then everybody like freaked out. But how was this any of a shock to anybody? And then on top of it, this silent agreement type fights, Kovalev's just throwing tap jabs all night. You know what I'm saying? That's not a Kovalev that I'm used to seeing. That's not the Kovalev that we saw in Yard, you know, right before Canelo Alvarez. You know, that's not the Kovalev I saw versus Ward. And then it's the same deal with Jermell. You know, Jermell's in that fight. He's looking like he's not even trying to hurt Canelo and everything else. You know what I'm saying? And you guys sit here and you praise it. This is why I call you guys feminists. You're like women. You praise weak stuff. You hate merit, just like feminists. You hate accountability, things like that. Things that are actually going to help these guys that you praise and worship. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same with the Durante, or I'm sorry, in his boots. you're sitting here praising his ducking and his more female qualities that he's displaying, you know, that we keep getting to see getting exposed as day and day goes by. Boots is a talent. He's got, you know, he's a special talent. You know, he can do some great things, but you're not even sure if you want to fight a Virgil Ortiz. You know what I'm saying? We got to go back to Tank Davis from the beginning. You know, when he was introduced to the silk sheets, to the silver platter. You know, Floyd actually told him you should fight Lomachenko. And Tank Davis was in the same positions as guys like Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez, who both, in my opinion, have lapped Gervonta Tank Davis. I'm not here necessarily trying to hate Gervonta Tank Davis. It's just the system you were raised in. It's a very effeminate system that you were brought up in. And when you see young boys, this transfers, you know, it doesn't just affect boxing. You know, when you're raising a fighter and grooming a fighter off an effeminate system, you understand? But you can see this across the board in Western civilization. You give a boy over to their mom, a boy's not going to learn accountability. He's not going to learn adversity. You know, the mom is just going to try to nurture you the whole time. A man is going to try to teach his son about nature. With a woman, it's about nurture. And these fighters are nurtured today. And if it screws up with their nature, you understand? So when you see a Tank Davis against a Lamont Roach, and he's getting hit, and he doesn't know how to deal with the adversity, he decides to take a knee. But again, I don't know what accountability is. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to come up with this excuse and talk about how hair grease got in my eye. You understand? All this should start to make sense to you. It should all start to make sense to you. They tried to maximize reward with the least amount of risk. And I'm sorry, this is the same system that your fighter, Canelo Alvarez, was groomed in as well. Now you guys can sit here and talk crap about Bud's resume. That's fine with me. But I'm going to give you another example of what I'm talking about. You guys swore up and down Spence had a superior resume. I was telling you that he's not even going to do what a Mean Machine did. Now, although you're here fighting Mean Machine, although Bud for many years had to go through what is known as a humiliation ritual, he's canceled, he's blackballed and all this other stuff, and he has to make chicken soup out of chicken dung. You understand? He has to fight people that he doesn't want to fight, like Mean Machine. And these guys are actually there to actually fight and beat him. We just talked about how Tank took a knee, by the way, and he blamed it on hair grease. It was a shock to him when he was in a ring with a guy who was actually there not to lay down and actually try to beat him. And with Errol Spence, it's the same thing. Drawn in his boots, it's the same thing. Canelo Alvarez, it's the same thing. It's fake it till you make it today. But when Errol Spence would get hit, and this was present throughout his career, he had a tendency, you guys were all saying he was a dog and all this crap. You understand? And I'm here telling you that he does things like turn his back and spits out his mouthpiece. That lets me know he's not a real dog. That lets me know, and that coupled with the fact that he's not fighting guys who are actually out there who can hurt him. You're fighting Ugas's of the world that only had 12 knockouts. Although Ugas he did hurt you. You know, if the ref didn't step in and stop Ugas from finishing the job, you know, or at least trying to derail his momentum, you know, he had a good chance to actually knock out Spence. We all saw it. It's on video. You can't deny it. And this is the preferential treatment aspect of it as well. But it wasn't just at the end of the career when you saw Spence spit out his mouthpiece against guys like Danny Garcia, who was a checked out fighter. You know what I'm saying? Or Ugas, again, only has 12 knockouts. And as soon as the ref stops his momentum, you know, for some reason he stops throwing punches, and now he just allows Spence to sit there and beat him up. But Spence turned his back and spit out his mouthpiece. He also did it versus Danny Garcia. And this also occurred during his career against no-name fighters. You understand? I knew from the beginning this guy didn't like to get hit. And I knew something was off with the matchmaking when you're ducking Randall Bailey off of 2 weeks' notice. And then they call Randall Bailey back and tell him, no, never mind, because they know that Randall Bailey's a hard hitter. Oh, so then I go back, I look through his career. Are you really fighting punchers? The answer is no, you're not. So obviously something's wrong there. And it's the same with Drawn in his boots.
Why don't you go get your bag from Turkey and just fight Ortiz? Ortiz has been showing decline. Ortiz has been getting beat up in these past fights. I think he's been knocked down how many times? At least 3 in his last 3 fights? So what are you still afraid of? You've still yet to fight a solid opponent who wasn't like sitting out for 2 years and just had a baby. You understand? But they go so far with this special type of preferential low-hanging fruit matchmaking. And they don't ever let these guys really grow up and learn about adversity and how to deal with it. We've talked about this before on this channel. It's called the kiddie pool. You understand? But I was saying, while you guys were saying Spence is this dog and Crawford's never fought someone like him and all this other nonsense, he's going to break his eye and whatever else. Same crap you guys are saying about Canelo today. You know, I was telling you he doesn't have dog, and Terrence Crawford is actually the first champion, the first real champion that he's fighting. He's not some guy that was emailed a belt. You understand? He's not some guy who was immediately given a vacant title like Sean Porter. I know he fought Danny Garcia for it, but same difference. You understand? Sean Porter was a 2-time champ over the span of 10 years. Zab Judah, just to give you guys a reference point, was a 5-time champ. Carl Froch was like a 4 or 5-time champ. Carl Froch, again, I know a lot of people hate Carl Froch, but his resume is heads and shoulders and toes above a guy like Calzaghe. I'm sorry. He fought guys in their prime. He fought everybody. And he definitely overachieved in his career. That's why I hold him in high regard. And unlike a Sean Porter and these Danny Garcia's guys that you're hyping up, you know, this guy was a 5-time champ. So now Crawford is only legit if he fights a guy like Sean Porter, who's only a 2-time champ and is like one of the only few guys that's allowed to fight for belts at 147. But back to the mindset of a coddled fighter, a fighter who is given silk sheets before they're even given adversity and proven to be the real deal. This is why when a Canelo Alvarez fought a Floyd Mayweather who was old, you couldn't win one round off your own merit because you were being assisted even before back then. You know what I'm saying? And again, with the Canelo in this fight, when you start hitting adversity, we see he gets frustrated. There's entitlement when it comes to guys like Tank Davis and Canelo Alvarez. Boots is right around the corner on this, by the way. You know, the nonsense that's going on with Boots, it's the same old nonsense. I don't know how you guys get behind Boots and act like, you know, he's Roy Jones or whatever it is you guys are trying to prop this dude up as, you know. But Canelo, you're at the point where you feel entitlement, you know what I'm saying? Regardless of what you guys want to say, how Turkey is, you know, assisting Crawford in this fight, which I don't think he is. You know, I think he respects that Crawford's a real fighter. I think that's what's good about their relationship. But he's out here telling Skull to not try to beat up on Canelo. I got money on this guy. And this is the type of preferential treatment a guy like Canelo has always relied on in his entire career. We've talked about careful selective matchmaking. We talked about silent agreements, non-disclosure agreements, whatever else. Training opponents like even a Ryan Garcia, Rocky Fielding. You know what I'm saying? And in these performances, you're still looking piss poor, by the way. This is what I'm saying. Canelo's not a generational talent. You know, he's the most assisted fighter. He's the most propped up. He's the guy that the machine desperately tries to prop up, just like in Hollywood today. You know, we're going to go with this girl boss thing. We don't care how much money we lose. Canelo's the same thing. He's a feminist mascot. He does not represent what's real in boxing. He represents what's fake in it. And the people, they pick up on it. Now, you guys on the internet, you seem louder and larger than what you actually are. You know, but a guy like Floyd Mayweather, a guy like Manny Pacquiao, those guys can sell and grow the sport. Canelo, I don't think grows the sport, guys. I really don't. Today's sport is definitely watered down. There's times where like a guy like Jake Paul can outperform Canelo Alvarez. That's the state of what boxing is in today. And it's because, again, this fake it till you make it, this coddling, where you no longer want to really truly put yourself at risk. You don't want to deal with adversity because you've allowed you've suckled on the nipple of the machine for too long. You've been pampered by the machine for too long. Again, you knock down a guy like Munguia, but you don't know how to finish him. Even the Caleb Plant fight, you finished him in the 11th round, I believe. But again, that's Caleb Plant. What has Caleb Plant done in the sport? And this is what I'm saying. Crawford, although he's fighting a mean machine, you know, you're getting better work. You're getting more experience from a guy who's actually out there trying to actually win and knock you out, as opposed to a guy like a Danny Garcia who's checked out. You understand? And you saw his performance. It was pathetic. He looked like he didn't even want to be out there when he was fighting a guy like Errol Spence. Although Spence is getting the names, you're not getting the real experience. You're not getting the real adversity that you need to prepare for a guy like Terrence Crawford. And with Canelo Alvarez, we sit here, you know, Caleb Plant's out here telling him, like, you know, I like you during the fight. He didn't say that verbatim, but you might as well. You know what I'm saying? You're a very good guy. You know what I'm saying? While you're getting beat up. Where's the rivalry and where's the pride at in today's boxing? Because it's entertainment. It's not a sport. But guys like Canelo, guys like Tank, they need this type of stuff, and they never learn true adversity. And they fight like it too, because both guys, they both have the same game plan. I can give up a bunch of rounds because I know I'll receive preferential treatment. And a guy like Crawford he's never been groomed off of that. He's never been raised off of that. You understand? Crawford was raised with tough love in the sport. A guy like Canelo wasn't. Guys like Gervonta Tank Davis and Canelo, they're told that they are the face of boxing, that they're the greatest thing. You know what I'm saying? Even though it's in a simulated environment where you have guys that are instructed not to really beat you up and all this other stuff. And we're still bringing up resumes on Crawford. You know what I'm saying? But again, it's just like with my analogy with Mean Machine. No, he doesn't have Sean Porter's name. No, he doesn't have Danny Garcia's name. But you're actually getting better value from a Mean Machine than you are a guy like Jermell Charlo, you understand, who's laying down in a fight, than a Kovalev who's just throwing tap jabs all night. You understand? You get the name, that's great. But where's the true experience? And then you wonder why you've seen things like Canelo get whitewashed at the beginning of his career and at the end of his career, and plus it's riddled with all kinds of controversy. Even the Skull fight. You understand? And this is what I'm trying to tell you. For a guy like Boots, he thinks it's all good right now, but in the future, he's going to be in the same place as a Gervonta Tank Davis. When you finally fight a real one, you're going to be put in a position. It was funny watching Tank during Roach. You could tell he was shocked, like, this guy's actually trying to beat me. You know what I'm saying? He didn't even know how to deal with it. He's like, oh man, let me take a knee real quick. Oh, you know, it's just hair grease. But that's what I'm saying. Boots isn't too far away from that same scenario with this pampering and with this coddling of his career. And with Canelo, you know, he got to fight guys like GGG, who was hyped up. We can all admit it. You understand? You do have the names. You fought him at opportunistic moments like a Shea Mosley, like a Miguel Cotto. You know, you got to fight guys like Matthew Hatton for your first belt. It just shows you the difference. You understand how guys are raised and how they're kept afloat, as opposed to guys who consistently are used to adversity, are used to not being credited, always being downplayed. You know what I'm saying? This is what keeps Crawford more dangerous and more fresh in this fight. He knows that he's held to a higher standard of accountability, unlike a guy like Gervonta Tank Davis, unlike a guy like Boots, unlike a guy like Canelo Alvarez. Canelo, again, these guys know they can give up a bunch of rounds and they're still going to get the W. You know, they can do PEDs, they're still going to be fine. Okay, 7 fighters in my camp just got busted. That's all right, just pay them some money, you know. go along with business. But this is what I'm telling you. Crawford is a real one. He's not part of your clique. He's not part of your groomed cinematic universe. You understand? And you know, what used to be successful with boxing, it used to be the MCU, now it's the MCU. And we see how things like Marvel and things like that are losing money and they're not bringing a profit. And boxing is very similar in the same situation. You know, more money's thrown at these projects, but you're not getting your value back in return. And this has been due to fighters like Canelo being what boxing pampers and centers its focus on. Instead of guys like Crawford, instead of guys like Benavidez, you know, the machine has to work against those guys. And this is what I'm saying. You're seeing what happens to pampered fighters. It's nice at first. It's nice initially, but guys like Tank, you've already been lapped by guys like Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney. They've already achieved far more in their career than you have, even with losses. You understand? And with Canelo, again, you're going to be in that ring. You're going to be sharing the ring with a guy who's there to actually win. A guy who's going to be doing everything he can to win. And you want it, you know, we've seen this in your past performances alone. You want to coast to a win. You know what I'm saying? You could have went out there. If you are who these people said you are, you could have knocked out Skull. You could have walked him down. You could have went in there, kept him trapped against the ropes and done maximum damage to him till he wanted to quit or you actually knock him out. But you didn't do that. You know, the dude was very happy and pleased with his performance and he felt that he won. You know, and there is some controversy to that fight. You know what I'm saying? And the controversy in that fight definitely outweighs the controversy in your guys' manufactured Madrimov analysis, which is laughable to me. But again, you don't have that grit in you anymore. Crawford still does. He's older. He's been dealing with more adversity. When he gets in trouble, again, that's just going to awake something in Crawford. When Canelo's dealing with adversity, for him and his perspective, oh man, when is this going to end? You know, why doesn't this guy just let me beat him? It's just like with Tank and Roach, you understand? Canelo doesn't even like these guys talking crap about him. He wants them to be respectful and everything else. He wants it one-sided, you know what I'm saying? But he's even at that point where he gets moist just because the guy's talking crap to him. And I'm trying to tell you, this whole Tank situation, it's not about if he's retired or not. You know, it's about the fact that this dude's been brought up in a coddled, effeminate system. Bud is not. You understand? Bud was brought up with tough love. Canelo was brought up with nurturing and pampering and all this other nonsense, and it is going to play a factor in this fight. And I just think it further solidifies Crawford winning this fight and making the whole boxing world and the machine look stupid again. But that's all I wanted to talk about for now. We will talk to you guys later. Bye.